Hi, today we are at the Lakes Crisis and Resource Center in Detroit Lakes, and we are going to talk about domestic violence awareness. My name is Grace Livermore, and I am a mental health therapist here at the Crisis Center, and I have Brittany with me today. Brittany and I met about 6 months ago when Brittany came to the Crisis Center to file a harassment restraining order because she was experiencing harassment by an ex. So Brittany is a survivor of domestic violence, and she is here today to talk to us a little bit about her story. So Brittany, I just want to thank you again for being here with us. I would imagine that it's very difficult to talk about this, and it's so appreciative that you're taking your time to come and share your story with us and others listening today. So Brittany, start wherever you want, but can you just tell us a little bit about your story with domestic violence and share your experience?
Sure. Yep. I left my abuser about 3 years ago. December of 2020 is when I left. We got together. He was the absolute greatest boyfriend in the whole world. And there was nothing in the world that could ever make me think less of him. And that deteriorated into a system of abuse. It started with yelling and screaming. It started with just leaving randomly and wondering when he was coming back. He was using my money to buy drugs. He then started beating me about 6 months into the relationship. And that progressively got worse and worse and worse. It would be just a slap here, but it got worse and worse and worse. He broke a lot of my items, especially things that came from my previous marriage. He broke things that are irreplaceable that came from my grandmother because he knew that that hurt me. Abuse isn't just physical. He was using my money to buy drugs instead of paying our bills and our rent. And so that caused financial issues. He was hiding my cards and my money from me so that I wouldn't know that that's what was happening. He actively tried to have me fired from my job because he felt inadequate about not having one. The obvious solution there would be for him to get one, but that didn't make sense to him. He had to take away what I had. From there, he also would try to prevent me from leaving the apartment. By whatever means necessary. Blocking the door, he'd take the keys to my car and go park my car somewhere and walk back. He also would take videos of me with the drugs in my system and threaten to send them to my family members and my bosses at work. And so those were the things that kept me from leaving for so long. Because those things are what they try to do to control you. And in my case, it was drugs and stuff, but other people use money. I used money also to try to control me. But eventually when I did leave, it was because I heard my dad's voice in my head one night when my abuser was physically assaulting me. And I heard my dad's voice say, "I don't want to bury my daughter." And that kept ringing through my ears as this event was happening. And it was the first time that I fought back. It was the first time that I physically fought him back and pushed him off of me and hit and screamed and scratched. The time before that, he was throwing dishes around me and hitting me and strangled me at one point. And I just let him, because at that point I was like, death would be better. Let's let him kill me. And I'm glad that I finally heard my dad's voice say that to me, because my mom had also said, "I'm watching him kill my daughter and I can't do anything about it." And as a victim, as a survivor, hearing those things from my parents is obviously heartbreaking, but it's also strength, because it inspired me to not just sit back and let him hurt me. It inspired me to actually do something about it and get out and get I had 2 lovely little kitties, still have them, but get us out. And that's what it took for me, was just hearing my parents' voices in my head during that incident telling me that they didn't want to bury their only daughter.
Thank you so much, Brittany, for sharing that, and I'm so glad that you survived that and were able to get out. I think that there was so much that happened before you got out. I know from our conversation that there's some stuff that happened afterwards too. Are you comfortable sharing a little bit about how abuse can continue even after the person leaves the relationship?
Yes. When a person leaves a relationship that is abusive, you do need to be cognizant of the fact that he's not just going to stop just because you're not there physically. My abuser, I moved an hour away from my abuser, and he did not have a car, he did not have a driver's license. On February 13th, 2021, he showed up outside my bedroom window at 4 in the morning in Audubon here. He lived in Fargo, and he took an Uber from his apartment in Fargo all the way out to my parents' house, the address of which we did not give him on purpose. And he stood outside my bedroom window knocking for 45 minutes in negative 40-degree wind chill conditions. And then he climbed back down the retaining wall that you have to climb up to get to my bedroom. He climbed back down that, hopped back in the Uber, and went back to Fargo. And he tried to charge my debit card for it, which he was not successful at, but I kind of laugh about it because he did all of those things and now he wants me to pay for it. Are you serious? But that's just one example. He has called and texted me. I don't know, I think I'm up to 7 restraining order violations now. He threatened to kill my entire family, over 50 voicemails in 2 days, and went into great detail about killing both of my parents, both of my brothers, my sister-in-law, my grandmother, my aunt, myself, my grandfather, and my nephew, and my ex-husband. 50 voicemails left for each of us who have phones. And that eventually triggered the police to step in and arrest him. Previous to that, they weren't really taking it all that seriously, to be completely honest. They'd arrest him, he'd go to jail, they'd give him bail and say, all right, be good, and then he'd get out and he'd break the law again and he'd go back in and he'd get bail and they'd say, all right, stay law-abiding, and then he'd get back out. The system really wasn't great for me for that in Fargo. But you do need to, once you get out, have a support system in place, and that's where the Lakes Crisis and Resource Center comes into play. They're an exceptional resource center. They have really good advice to give. Changing your phone number is obviously a thing that you should do, but I've had the same phone number since I was 14. Everything is linked to that phone number. That's really hard to do. Changing your name, maybe. Mm-hmm. Changing your address. They have these resources to be able to help you out with that.
Right. Yes. Thank you for saying that. And so you talked a little bit about how you have the support of your parents. Have there been other people, or can you say more about how your parents were supportive, or who was able to help you in kind of getting yourself to a safe point and working on your healing journey?
Well, my parents were obviously a very big part of that. I actually just moved out of their house this month, the beginning of this month. I lived at their lake house for the last 3 years while I healed, while I went through the withdrawal from the drugs, which was super fun, not knowing that that's what was going on. Dealing with all of the ongoing trauma of him trying to contact me, him trying to get back with me. One of the text messages that he sent me in April asked if we could meet and talk about it and work it out, as if that was something that could be mended. He just doesn't understand the damage that he's done. And I don't have anything to say to him about it. But having parents, having a place to go is the biggest hurdle for a lot of people. Having somewhere to go to. Especially if there are kids and pets involved, it's hard to find a space where you can go. Anyone can go to a shelter by themselves, but you can't bring your cats to a homeless shelter. So being able to provide that to anyone who you know who's being abused is going to help them get out of that situation a lot easier. Helping them out financially, because chances are, if someone's going through a domestic violence situation, they're also being financially abused. They're being psychologically abused. It's not just one thing. And so my parents being really understanding and really helpful with that. My mom cooked me meals every night. She always made sure that it was something that I not only liked, but like wanted, like craved. She made all of my favorites, and she made them like extra fatty because I also battle anorexia. And so at the time that I went to live with my parents, I was 96 pounds. So I was really tiny. I was really, really little. So my parents were always my brother made brownies, I think, every night. Like, make sure that you're not just, okay, well, here's a space to live, but be there to support them. If they don't want to talk about it, don't push it. And please do not ask why they stayed, because they are feeling judged already. They're already thinking to themselves, I should have gotten out sooner. I don't know why I stayed. I don't know what's going on. And to go and ask them that question really puts them on the defensive, and they'll feel like you don't support them, and they might go back to what is familiar. Because as bad as it is to be abused, it's the devil you know, and sometimes it's easier to just stay.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Brittany. We talked about what abuse can look like before leaving and after leaving, and I think you emphasized some good points about how it's important to use your support system. So whether this is, if you happen to have family members that are supportive, talk to them and share, friends, and then of course resources like the Crisis Center. We want to talk to you. We want to hear what's going on. We want to help in whatever way we can. Brittany, I'm wondering if you could tell us about some red flags to look for in relationships, things to watch out for, or maybe to talk to someone about if you're experiencing.
So one of the biggest things that, in my experience, I found really is an indicator that people maybe wouldn't think of. I'm going to use my situation as an example. One of the best dates that I went on with my abuser was to the Pacific Ocean at sunset. And while I was looking at the sunset, I said something along the lines of, wow, that's so beautiful. And while looking at me, he said, yes, it is. And that made my heart melt. And it felt amazing. It was so beautiful. It was such a beautiful moment. And it should be in any relationship. That is a great moment. But when 6 months later, not getting in a fight, not being abused, not having a bad day, but having a regular day where you're maybe just eating dinner together and watching TV, when that day feels like the sunset, the worst day must be really bad. So if someone is saying something along the lines of, oh, every day just feels so incredible, it's so great, there might be something going on behind that. If every day for someone feels like the sunset, their bad days are really bad. Obviously look for marks. If they are suddenly more bruised than usual, and I say more bruised than usual because clumsy, I have bruises all over my legs and arms all the time. But if you're noticing there are deeper bruises, there are bruises on their necks. That's a big one to watch out for. If they are more disheveled than usual, if they're not showing up for things, they're bailing last minute, or if they're at things, if they're at events with you, but they're constantly on their phone trying to reassure their partner, there's probably abuse going on at home. So those are things that I would definitely watch out for. If they're constantly unable to pay for things that they used to be able to pay for, rent, bills, etc., there's probably abuse going on at home. Those are the things I could think of.
So these are things to look out for in friends or family members.
Yes, friends
right?
and family members, absolutely.
And so if I saw a friend or family member that was going through this, what would be helpful for me to say to them?
That's a really hard one, because when you're in it, you don't always recognize it. When you're a survivor, when you're a victim, so survivor, you've lived through it, you're good. But when you're a victim of it, it's ongoing. It's hard to recognize what you're going through. The physical abuse is obvious, but you don't always recognize the psychological abuse. You don't always recognize the financial abuse. And so just asking people, if you ask them about their partner, ask them, honestly, if someone had asked me if something was going on at home, I don't think I would have been honest about it. I did hide it. I hid it a lot.
Right.
I was ashamed of it. So maybe the answer to that question is to just be open.
Right.
Be open to the conversation starting, but it might need to come from the victim.
Right. Right. And make yourself an approachable person and make it clear that, if there ever is anything that you want to talk about, you
just always be there. Just always be. If you think that someone is being abused, just make yourself as open as humanly possible.
That's good. That's really good advice. Awesome. Is there anything else, Brittany, that you want to say to get out there for someone that might be thinking about leaving or is going through this right now?
Yes. Leaving is the hardest part of this whole situation, followed second by staying gone. Leaving is very difficult because it often leads to an escalation. They will often escalate in a way to try to force you to stay. In my case, it was threatening to kill my entire family, threatening to release private images online to all of my friends, as well as those incidences where I was drugged and completely unaware what was going on. He threatened to release all of those. And he's threatened to release them 3 or 4 times since I left. Be prepared for them to come up with those things, and understand that even though they're going to still try to come for you, leaving is still the best option. Leaving and getting yourself out and getting yourself safe so that you can start to heal and start to move on with your life is always the best option. It's hard to do. You do have to have a support system in place, but your best bet to live is to get out.
Very well said. We unfortunately know that from the months of August 2022 to August of 2023, there was 31 people in Minnesota who died by intimate partner violence. And so I'm really glad you brought that up. The leaving stage is incredibly dangerous, and the more people that you can get to support you in it, the better. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you survive. And of course, if you have children, that you can get them out and help them to survive too. Brittany, I can't thank you enough for being here today and talking with us about this. We are all incredibly grateful for your bravery and sharing your story, and I hope you know that it's going to reach people and it's going to make a difference. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
If you are experiencing domestic violence, we hope that you call us here at the Lakes Crisis and Resource Center at 218-847-7446. We want to hear your story, we want to talk to you, and you are not alone.
This video is brought to you in part by Stellar Human Services, mental health services for children and adults.